Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for our fourth and final virtual workshop this year on civic engagement for outdoor enthusiasts. I can't think of a more relevant topic at such an important time. And so I'm really, really grateful that we have this workshop scheduled. I'm Rachel Olzer. I use she and they pronouns. I'm the executive director of All Bikes Welcome and Great Mountain Bike Festival. For those of you who are new, All Bikes Welcome is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission to create more racial equity and gender diversity in cycling in the outdoors. All Bikes Welcome employs a for us, by us approach to create year-round, low-cost programming in and around Northwest Arkansas. We started this workshop series at the beginning of 2023 in an effort to create more opportunities for learning about bikes in a low-stakes environment led by folks from our community. This year's workshop series has moved to a virtual platform and is sponsored by Trailblazers with a generous grant from the Bentonville Moves Coalition. So thank you to them for supporting our work. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight's workshop presenter, Representative Angelica Rubio. Representative Rubio is an American politician who has served in the New Mexico House of Representatives from the 35th District since 2017. She's worked on many, many issues during her tenure, ranging from raising the minimum wage to the designation of Organ Mountain Desert Peaks National Monument. Representative Rubio has also been a vocal opponent of the Trump border wall and even voted against allowing New Mexico state land to be used for its construction. Additionally, she introduced the now approved House Bill 388 requiring New Mexico businesses and public facilities to label single-stall restrooms as gender neutral. Representative Rubio has also worked to bring about the Outdoor Equity Fund, which was established in 2019 to break down barriers and ensure equitable access to the outdoors for all youth in New Mexico. Since 2020, ORD has awarded over $6.4 million to connect more than 83,000 youth to impactful outdoor experiences that ensures that we're inspiring our next generation of outdoor recreationists and conservation leaders. These are just a few of the incredible things that she's done. I was having trouble figuring out what to include. And it's one of the reasons that it's my distinct pleasure to have her here with us tonight. Tonight, Representative Rubio will present for about 45 minutes to an hour, after which we'll have a 15-minute live Q&A. However, this presentation is fluid and we do welcome questions throughout. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout, so please feel free to drop your questions and we will be sure to get to them during the presentation. We also have on-screen sign language interpretation, so thank you to Alicia and the Sign Language Interpretation Network for joining us. And without further ado, Representative Angelica Rubio, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it. And thank you, Alicia. And thanks for everybody who's watching. This is my first time doing something like this, so bear with me. My special guest here is Yoko. I'm trying to figure out my dog. So if you hear her bark, that's who it is. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you all. Again, I'm Angelica. I serve as a state representative here in New Mexico for District 35, the beautiful city of Las Cruces. We are the second largest city in the country, in the state, and it's one of my favorite places to ride bikes. So if you ever want to come to New Mexico and ride bikes, don't go up north, come down here to Cruces. We will give you the time of your lives. So that is an open invitation from me. I am really happy to be here. I wish it was under better circumstances. I know that a couple weeks ago we had, and at least for me, it was a very heartbreaking election. And I've gone through a number of feelings of grief. And so initially it was this dread of what the future might hold. And now I just feel like this this sense of determination, and not only about how I am going to survive, but also how I'm going to support others to continue on and to keep fighting another day. And so I hope that by the end of tonight, and that after we have this workshop, that that you will feel some sense of hope as well, and that knowing that you too can be a part of this ongoing fight that I feel like I'm constantly in, which is trying to work towards liberation for all of us. For me, it's through policy, and so I just want you all to know that you don't have to be an elected official to do this, that you can be just a regular person living in your small town, in your small community across the country, and can make such significant change for your neighbors. And so thank you for being here. I was born and raised here in New Mexico. I was born in a small town called Lake Arthur, and it had a very small population. My graduating class in high school was 22 people, and it's still the largest class in the history of my school. And I'm proud to say that I was president of my student class junior and senior year. And I've always been really proud of that, just because I've just always had this want to be a leader. And of course, I'm sure we've all gone through that whole process of that we were bossy or whatever, but I am very proud at the idea of that I was bossy growing up as a kid, and I continue to do that even to this day. And my parents are immigrants from Mexico. And so from a very, very small child, as a very small child, I always had this instinct to just want to help people. And I mean, I was a translator for my parents. I was constantly like helping them and assisting them in like their doctor's appointments and things like that. And so for me, just the idea of service and service to others has always just been a part of my life. And so when we're here tonight, as we're talking about just civic engagement and what it means to organize and mobilize our communities to win policies for our people, I think is critical for just what we're going to endure over the course of the next few years under what I believe is a very growing fascist government. And so I think at this moment in time, our communities need us now more than ever. And so I hope that with the fact that just regardless of what's happening at the federal level, that while they may dismantle some things that will impact us here in the long term, that you all have faith still, because I do, in what local and state government can do. And so we need that more than ever. Be in community. I urge you to be in community. Host bike rides. I hosted a bike ride on Saturday to sort of to regroup, because I feel like that's something that we all need right now. As an elected official, I have been serving for the last 8 years. January will be the start of my 8th year. And as Rachel noted, there are a lot of things that I have championed through my time in the legislature. And the reason that I champion so many different things is because I look at a lot of these issues intersectionally. I know that there's so many issues that we deal with on an ongoing basis that are very like siloed. But one of the things that I learned at a very young age, especially as a community organizer, is that it's important to always center folks who live on the margins. And for me, that's really ensuring that Black and Indigenous women, especially, and non-binary folks, are at the center of any policy that I try to pass. And to me, that is very, very important to do, because when you do that, we make everybody's life better. And so that to me is very, very important. Tonight, I will go through and talk to you all about just understanding your local government and some of the civic processes that come from centering your community. And I'm going to use the example that Rachel shared a little bit in my intro around the creation of the Outdoor Equity Fund. The Outdoor Equity Fund, which we were able to create in 2019, is the first of its kind in the country at the time. Now there's several states who have already passed legislation to create their own fund. And there's actual legislation in Congress to actually make it a federal thing. It's still unclear how that will move forward with the next administration. But this was just something that it just became very popular. And it didn't become popular because I wish I could say it was because of me, but it didn't have anything to do with me. It had to do with the fact that we were able to build so much community and grassroots power to ensure that what we wanted would make it through every step of the way. And so one of the first things that I'd like to just talk about is just understanding your local and state government structure. Cities, counties, and states typically all have similar responsibilities when it comes to planning and funding. What might differ are just the jurisdictions and the mechanics in which things might work. In some cities, it's like you have a city manager. In other places, you have a mayor. There might be a number of different counselors, or depending on who's in power, it could be the Democrats or the Republicans in power. But generally speaking, every city, every town, every state manages a lot of the things that are important to us. They operate very, very similarly. I think the difference between for the reason why it's so important for us to be a part of these conversations is that local and state governments and federal government have historically impacted Black and Indigenous communities in bad ways, and that it's our job to ensure that they do better for these communities. And so that is one of the reasons why I encourage you all to participate in your local and state politics, because these are the areas in which you can see more change for the communities that we're all serving. Before I start talking about our process with the Outdoor Equity Fund, I just wanted to just also lay out the fact that there are some essential terms and processes for advocating for change. The first thing is people, we do a lot of budgeting in local and state politics or election or policy making. I want to be very clear, and I think this is important because you should write this down for like anytime you have a conversation with an elected official. But a budget is a moral document. Where we spend our money, where and who we invest that money in, like that is a choice. And so if an elected official if there are elected officials who just want to build prisons, but they don't want to actually invest in schools, that is a moral choice. And so that's why it's so important that when we're talking about budgets, even though they can be kind of wonky and not feel like they're not important, budgeting is actually one of the first most important things that you should involve yourself in. Is what is your city and town actually spending the money in? Is it going to the right places? And when you actually tell your elected official, like, yo, this is a moral document, like this is how we should be spending our money, a lot of times they will listen, because you're actually you're challenging them to actually think about their own values when they're moving forward on a vote on a particular budget item. The second thing is that's really important are public hearings, especially as you're starting to like move along any type of ordinance or piece of legislation or any type of community plan. You should be a part of all of that, especially in your neighborhood or in your community. Sometimes you hear that, oh, the city's putting on like the neighborhood association is hosting like a community plan for like they're building an intersection, or they're rehabbing like some sort of infrastructure around like sidewalks. All of those types of hearings you all should be a part of, because behind that are dollars. And so when we go back to like the budget, like who's the developer? Is this developer just about building a piece of infrastructure that maybe is not good for the community, but it's good for their pockets? Like those are the sort of questions that you should be asking yourself as you're having as you're going through these public hearings, and just being and showing that and being present at these places, because the reason cities and towns get away with pushing their own ideas and their agenda is because a lot of times we're not there to push back on them. And finally, in terms of like key processes, we should talk about like the public hearings, and when you have elected champions who serve on city council or on state legislature. I think right now things are becoming so much more polarized after this election that many of your champions who are serving in city council or in state legislatures, they are having to go up on their own to essentially defend something that's important to our communities. And so it's vital that you all, regardless of after, it's one thing to elect someone and that they win their election, but be sure to always support them past election while they're governing, because from experience, I think that there's a lot of us who have taken a lot of tough votes, and a lot of times we are having to do all of those things alone. That it's important for you all to just get your people elected, but don't leave them there on their own. Like, definitely try to stick with them, and ensure that not only are you supporting them, but that you're also holding them accountable to not like going into the dark side, because there's a tendency for that to also happen. So I'm gonna just use this example of the Outdoor Equity Fund. Because the Outdoor Equity Fund, now that it's done, and as Rachel mentioned, we've been able to take thousands of kids outside here in New Mexico. It was definitely a really important it was challenging. It was a really hard fight to get the Outdoor Equity Fund to move forward. And part of that is because of the fact that it was an idea that we literally wrote down on a napkin. It was just me and a homie who like went out for drinks, and we wrote like this idea out on a napkin. And that napkin eventually became like this Outdoor Equity Fund. And so this is why I say, like, you don't have to be an experienced like politician or legislator to get things done. We literally have created legislation from things that were just written on a piece of paper or like on a napkin. And so, oh, that's a really great question. So before going forward, I'll answer Mojo Cycling. I struggle with finding information on what's going on at the local level. Any suggestions on ways to find information on what's going on, both with budgets, policies, and during election cycles? Yeah, so depending on where you live, it can always be a little bit challenging because not every city has, or every town has the capacity to really like highlight things in social media or things like that. Public things have to be announced publicly with a certain amount of time ahead of time before a hearing or a meeting. And so that is something to just keep in mind, that government, there's public notices have to be made prior to meetings, like ahead of time. There's got to be a significant time. One thing that I will say that is really important, because I'm also a community organizer, is I would start with like going to the website of the city, finding out who your counselors are, and then figuring out who is your particular counselor, and then trying to see if maybe they're hosting any type of event, or like sometimes counselors will do like stuff at the coffee shop, like at a local coffee shop. You can find them there. Sometimes they do town halls. I would say that either by doing that or actually attending the meetings. Sometimes a lot of the meetings happen every week, and so if you can attend those meetings, you can start. And then the agendas should be public online. You should be able to see a lot of that information, and start to research, like, one, who's your counselor, and then in regards to like the budgets and the policies, every counselor, every city has different we have here we have a zoning commission, or we have a zoning and planning, we have transportation and infrastructure commission. So like there's all these little commissions that you can start participating in, because that's where all the ideas start to come up, where eventually they make it to council for votes. So like votes don't happen just like rapidly. And this is what I was telling some folks last week, is like, I wish government was faster, but it's not. Like government takes a very long time to get anything done. And when it comes to like even local politics, local city councils, it's that much more difficult, because you have to go through all these checks and balances. So if you have this really cool idea around infrastructure, like you're going to have to go speak to somebody at this planning committee, and then that planning committee has to like talk about it. They have to debate it. They have to do like an environmental study maybe, and then eventually it'll go to council, and then you actually get something through. I will say my first experience working with city council was very controversial. Like people still like don't like me because of what happened, but I was an organizer at the time, and we were ready. We started like quietly. We did like this like quiet campaign where we started collecting signatures, asking people if they were interested in raising the minimum wage here in Las Cruces. Because here in New Mexico, the minimum wage at the time was like $7.25. I think it was the same as nationally, but we wanted to raise it to $10.10. And it became like the most controversial issue that anybody has ever been a part of. But it was awesome because we didn't have to go through any of those mechanics of like talking to planners or anything like that. We went straight to figuring out that we could do a ballot initiative, and that if we collected enough signatures, it was like a percentage of like the last election. And if we had enough of those signatures, then we could put it on the ballot. And I just remember we collected so many signatures. I think it was like 7,000 signatures. And this is a small community, but we collected thousands of signatures, and the city council eventually like started to listen to us and eventually passed the minimum wage. Like we didn't have to go through that whole thing. It was a battle. There's scars that I'm still like reeling from that campaign, but it opened my eyes to just a lot of like the internal stuff around just how to win campaigns. And this is why this is so important, y'all, about like why you don't need to be an elected official or a politician to do this work, and why it's so much powerful to just be in community and be surrounded by people who have the same values as you do. Because when you come together in a collective, you can be so powerful. Like there are people who are in elected office who will change their minds. Like because you show up if you show up at a town hall or at a city at a meeting, at a town meeting, you will scare city councilors to vote your way. And I think this is what we're seeing right now with like politics at the national level. You see it at school boards. This is another thing. I encourage you all to go to school board meetings if you can, if you have children and you're interested, or even if you believe in like issues related to education, like run for office and be on a school board. Because right now school boards are under attack with banning books, and like our trans community is being impacted at the local level. And so these are the places where your voices could be so impactful. And so I think once an elected official sees you there and you're pushing back on a lot of what they think is the right thing to do, you're able to really change their mind, because public comment and all of that is just, it's very, very important for change. And this is what happened with the Outdoor Equity Fund. And this is the reason why I use this example of how we're able to make change, is because in 2019, it was a governor's race, and it was also an election for the state legislature here in New Mexico. And all the summer and fall right before the election, all I kept hearing about was we needed to diversify our economy here in New Mexico because we're very heavily dependent on oil and gas. And like 50% of our budget is all oil and gas and comes from oil and gas. And so the work has always been to diversify our economy away from that industry. And outdoor recreation, as some of you may already know here in New Mexico, is just really popular. Like it's really beautiful here in New Mexico. We have like this amazing land where people can ride their bikes and hike and climb and do and ski and do all kinds of things. And so people wanted to profit off of that. And I've always had like this kind of like ick around outdoor recreation. And so I was telling myself, you know, outdoor rec, that economy is going to grow with or without me. Like I need to figure out how to sort of like put up some guardrails. And so me and one of my friends who now is in Congress, it's the napkin idea. Him and I went out for drinks and we came up with this outdoor equity fund idea. And what the outdoor equity fund would do is that it would be attached to the creation of the Division of Outdoor Recreation. And we would then use funds from the state to then distribute to organizations all across the state who will then take kids outside. And not just like to do like educational classes or anything like that. Like we wanted kids to get their hands dirty. Like we wanted them to learn how to ride bikes, mountain bike. We wanted them to like go out, learn, hike. I mean, we have a national monument here where like none of the kids had ever gone on a hike before. And so this was some of the things that we were looking at, but also because New Mexico has a very poor quality of life for young children. It's always, for the last few years, it had been number one as like the worst place to raise a child. And that was another reason why we decided to create the Outdoor Equity Fund, was because we didn't want to continue this consistent narrative that New Mexico was a bad place for children. And so Outdoor Equity Fund really helped to propel this conversation around like, yes, we need better jobs for people. We need affordable housing. We need free healthcare. But we also need children to be able to play. Like that was just the part that was really what we wanted about Outdoor Equity Fund. And we didn't want it to just all go to tourists to come in and benefit from our land. We wanted our own people, our own children to be able to benefit from that. And so we pitched this idea to the governor, and or who was going to be our governor, and she liked it. But the senator who was hosting or who was sponsoring the legislation to create the Division of Outdoor Recreation was not on board. Like their whole thing was, we need to diversify our economy. That is the priority. Why don't you do a separate bill for Outdoor Equity Fund? That is not important. Like it is important, but there's no connection to the legislation. But after we pitched it to the governor-elect, she was really intrigued. And I think the reason that it ended up passing, and this is why I think it's really important for us to talk about, is because the only reason that the Outdoor Equity Fund exists is because through my work in raising minimum wage, through my work on immigration rights, because I do a lot of work around immigration advocacy, and workers' rights and climate justice, like all of these issues for me are very intersectional because they impact my life. And so we had a very like diverse coalition that I don't think this state had ever really seen before. Like you had the LGBTQ community, immigrant rights advocates, climate justice organizations, worker justice organizations, unions, labor, all throwing down for Outdoor Equity Fund. And they all signed on to a letter that said that we will not support the creation of a Division of Outdoor Recreation unless Outdoor Equity Fund is linked to the legislation. And like nothing could be done after that. We had over like 40 organizations statewide who signed on to this letter. And now the Outdoor Equity Fund is one of the most one of the most successful programs that the state has ever really had, especially when it comes to ensuring that young people have access to the outdoors. And part of the reason that it was so successful was because of the coalition, but it was also, we also had to be very, very disciplined. We had to ensure that we had the data. We needed the data that illustrated the reality of young people here in New Mexico. We needed the data to show that how kids' lives could be transformed. We needed the data to show that what happens if we get young people outside, and maybe one day they'll want to become like a river guide, or somebody that's like a steward of our land. And so people started to think about how could this be part of our higher education, like cradle to career, creating ambassadorships. All these different things started to happen. And so we've been working on sources for relevant data, like doing community surveys with organizations, having kids talk about on video, how this all has changed their lives. I mean, there was a story that we had early on where there was kids who went to juvenile. They were sent to juvie, and they were two kids who were in different gangs, and we took them. They took this, not me, but the people that were part of the initial thought process of this program. They took them out to the Gila. The Gila here in New Mexico, it's the last free-flowing river in the country. These two kids were completely transformed. They became homies after that. And to think that at that time they were just from separate gangs. This is the sort of stories that we kept hearing from people as to why we needed to create something so important. And so this is why it's important that it's not just about the policy, but it's amplifying community voices, gathering all these stories and perspectives from young people, especially. They all came to the state capitol. They all participated in public comment. Throughout the years when we're not in session, we have what these things are called interim committees, where we travel all over the state hearing from communities around the state. You have these young people just showing up at these interim committees talking about how Outdoor Equity Fund has changed their lives, how they learned to ride a bike at these places, at these organizations. And then we also take policymakers along with us in some of these outings, so that they can also see firsthand how Outdoor Equity Fund is not only just working in other places, but how it's even working in their own districts. There's the Silver Stallions in the northwestern part of New Mexico on Navajo Nation. They were able to get funds from the Outdoor Equity Fund, and they've been teaching all these Native kids how to ride their bikes. And they just came out with a really cool documentary a couple months ago. I can't remember the name right now, but I can share it later with Rachel, and then and maybe they can share it on Instagram. But these are sort of the stories that we're hearing all the time about how programs like this are helping people. And again, this was something that just came out of a napkin at a bar while we were drinking beer. This is something that you all can do in your own communities, where this just one little idea can just turn out to become something so impactful. The one thing that I really want to into the dirt. That's right. Thank you for that, Sarah. One of the things that I think is really important in order to win a lot of these campaigns and these policies is how you engage with elected officials. One of my favorite things to do, especially in this work, is power mapping. And power mapping is important in terms of how you navigate your power. There's an organizing principle that is called no permanent allies, no permanent enemies, just permanent self-interests. And this is an organizing principle that I stand by as an organizer, but also as an elected official, in that as your self-interest is never going to change, but the people who help you get to your self-interest are always going to change. That's why Sometimes we get really like, we sometimes idolize our elected officials, like our politicians. We think that they're like us. A lot of times they're not, because this is the organizing principle that even they are navigating through, is that sometimes you have to like align yourself with certain people in order to get your own self-interest done. And so I think this is why it's so important to do power mapping, especially in your own community, that when you are thinking about an idea, that you have to look at all of the different people who are, say, on council, but also who are on, like, for example, with our minimum wage campaign here in Las Cruces, we knew we didn't have the support of the entire city council. We knew that we didn't have the support of a lot of the small businesses here in Las Cruces, but we had a lot of support from faith-based organization or faith-based churches and the synagogue here locally, because they believed in fair wages. They believed that people needed to be paid a dignified wage. And so a lot of this petition and signatures that we collected were in a lot of like these faith-based spaces, that eventually, when it came down to going to city council, many of the councilors were confronted by like their Catholic priest, who said, yo, you need to support this this wage increase. And so that's where a lot of these like conversations happen with power mapping, is that there are decision makers who are constantly going to be moving along the way, and that's one of the things that you need to really take into consideration when you're thinking through a path to winning, is like, who's going to be with you throughout the entire process, and who are you going to have to constantly like hold their hand to ensure that they're with you the entire time. Like I said, power mapping is my favorite thing to do. I love to do the research behind it. I love to like sometimes I like to put pictures of like their heads and like map things out. And so if anybody's ever interested in doing a power map in your own, like if you don't know anybody that will help you do a power map, I will be happy to help you do that, because it's one of my favorite things to do. But the reason that it's so important is because it holds representatives and officials accountable. You start to understand the power dynamics that might exist. And then when you do identify allies in office who prioritize issues that you care about, especially when it comes to supporting marginalized communities, you start to see how things might work. And that's why like power mapping, building relationships is so critical. I think when it comes to the Outdoor Equity Fund, the reason that it was so successful was because of we were able to center community voices in a lot of our public meetings. There was a lot of preparation for that in order to make some impact in some of these meetings and some of these hearings, ensuring that a lot of these diverse voices who are often underrepresented, that they were at the center of a lot of those discussions. And so that's something that I highly encourage, is that you always center community voices in these public spaces. Leveraging your social media for awareness and support. We had an ongoing campaign throughout the time, that from the moment we introduced the Outdoor Equity Fund until the day that the governor signed it, like we ensured that there was a constant push for social media posts around sharing the stories, raising awareness around the bill, calling for actions. Especially like there was one time where the bill just sat in committee. There was a committee it needed to be heard at. It sat there for almost 2.5 weeks, and we were really freaking out that it was never going to get heard. And we had this whole social media campaign, this call-in campaign, where people were slamming one of the senators because he wasn't hearing the bill. Eventually he heard the bill and we were able to pass it out. But it was these types of conversations, or these types of leveraging social media, that really helped to amplify that. And then, of course, the storytelling for advocacy is really critical. You developing a narrative that moves beyond statistics. Excuse me, y'all. I get so excited I forget to drink water. It's important to have these narratives because you can have all the statistics that you want, but nothing compares to actually highlighting the human impact of a story that excuse me, of like how, for example, the Outdoor Equity Fund completely transformed the life of a young person. And lastly, and I'll open it up for questions after this, but after all of the work that you've done, I think it's important for you all to think about like not only celebrating the wins, but also addressing like your resilience in this advocacy work, because it also takes an emotional toll when you're pushing for change, especially when it comes to serving communities that have been underserved for so long. And so I think we are in the moment right now, especially with the election, where I think a lot of us have felt like burnt out, where we're just not sure if we can like keep going. And I know that there's communities around the country who are feeling that like they come out every election and this is what we like end up with. And for those of us who really believe in in ensuring that like we make life better for others, like this work is going to continue to be hard. Like you will deal with the burnout, but that you really truly try to recognize a lot of the emotional toll, and making sure that you're out, you're riding your bike, you're still trying to create joy in your life, that you have the support systems and the self-care practices that you need to sustain. Because if I'm tired and I'm burnt out and I don't take care of myself, then that means I can't take care of like my community. And so I think that's one of the biggest lessons for tonight for sure, is that learn like fight all you can for your people, and do what you can for your people. And the moment that you start to feel like you need to rest and you need to like chill out for a bit, like remember that not to feel guilty about that. Like it's better to take the time, um because your community is going to need you for the long term. And so um that's where I'd like to end, is that um celebrate the wins and also really take care of yourself. And we can definitely open it up for questions if anybody has anything else. Thank you all. It was fun doing all of this in preparation for you all. And like I said, yeah, the last couple weeks have just been, I think all of us have just been going through sort of like the ups and downs. I don't know about you all, but like there are moments where I feel like really, really happy. And then I'm like, oh, the election, like I think about the election. And so I think that there's just moments like that where we just have to like not let people take away our joy and keep going, you know? So the question, what would you consider to be the lowest hanging fruit in terms of how to get involved right now? Um, that's a good question. I mean, I guess it just really depends. I think right now, a lot of people are sort of like, well, for one, if you can help it, I mean, I think the administration or the upcoming administration really wants to wear us out. Like they want us to be hopeless and they want us to feel like a lot of despair. And so what I would encourage people is to like if you live in if you live in a community where there are organizations doing community work like racial and social justice work, um I would encourage you to like reach out to those organizations and be in community with them, because they're constantly working on how to build a better like life for people in their community. And so that's one thing. Like if you're in a really if you have a really great biking community, for example, very progressive, like build some community there. And the reason, like, I want to just kind of say, like, keep your head down at this point, because there's just going to be such a long road ahead of us, is that like just be in community with each other. The time will come where we need to like mobilize and like and do what we need to do to like really like fight back. um but for now, I feel like we, especially since the pandemic, we've been, and I say this for myself, is like I've been very isolated, where to the point where like it's really hard for me. It had been really hard for me to be like out with people. And so what I've had to do personally for myself the last couple weeks, and it's actually been very like um it's been very soothing for like my soul, is that I have just been doing more things with people. I've been going out on bike rides. I've been spending time with like people who we have a a young person here. Her name's Grace, and she has developmental disabilities, but she always leads the rides out when we do like different rides here in the community. And so getting to spend time with people like Grace and others, I think going to be really, really important for us as we move forward, because y'all, this is going to be a long long road. And so we need to ensure that we're in a good place for ourselves to be able to help other people. Paola asks, are there any key words that help get our representatives' attention when calling, emailing, or talking in person when we are trying to discuss a bill that is controversial in the community? That's a good question. I mean, I'm not going to lie that because I struggle with it a lot being an elected official, that um there are lawmakers who don't bother talking to me because I'm not a lawyer. Like they will dismiss me because I don't have like that legal like jargon or whatever. And to that I'm just like F that. Like you have every right to be in a space more than they do. um and when it comes to the language, like, no, I mean, I think what's important is that you understand what it is, the legislation or the resolutions that you're looking at, that you understand what they are, like do your research and all of that. But what's really critical is that um it's really highlighting the storytelling, and ensuring that you're centering like the community, the people that are going to greatly benefit from these pieces of legislation. Like when we're talking about the outdoor equity fund, or like raising the minimum wage here in Las Cruces, um like we were always centering the stories of like tipped wage workers. For example, tipped wage workers were only making $2.13, and I think that's still the national average. And like for some people who work tipped wages, that might be fine for them, just depending on the industry that they're in. A lot of like folks who work like in bar service or whatever, they make a lot of money and they like the tipped wage. But there were other tipped wage workers that we actually had come and speak on their own behalf, because 213 just isn't enough to like raise a family. And so if you can center stories like that, and talk about how so and so is a struggling like single mother who can no longer like afford to live off of like these types of wages. You don't necessarily need to know the how to like the specifics of the legislation. You don't have to speak in the language of how the bill is written, because also I will say that the way we write up policy is so like it's designed to keep us out of the process. And so that's why we need to like insert ourselves into it, because if we don't, then we can't change it. And so it's important that like don't get intimidated by the language that's in a bill or like all these like Robert's rules, because we deal with a lot of that in the legislature. Is that these are systems that were built on like the pillars of white supremacy, and it's really up to us to work towards dismantling that. And by you speaking in your own way of advocacy, like that to me is that's powerful. And that's what slowly but surely starts to dismantle a lot of these like pillars that continue to uphold a lot of these systems that were just not designed for a lot of us to be in. And so I feel like that's like a you challenging that is like that's a form of resistance, and I think that that's important. Yeah, I hate Robert's rules too. Yeah, that's the thing, is that when somebody knows the rules really really well, they use it to their advantage. And sadly I think that's where sometimes, and I say we, like those of us on the left, because I'm a leftist, is that we need to be better about learning a lot of these rules and procedures, because in the meantime we have to be able to know how to work the system. And so at least for the time being, you know. And so yeah, I dislike them too. And at the same time it's like trying to figure out how to learn them so that we can use them for to help our people. I wasn't sure if I missed anything up at the top. As an elected official, what does support look like for you? That's a really good question. That's a very good question, because it's always hard for me to ask for help. Um, and so I think a lot of it, so I didn't share this before, but here in New Mexico, we are the only state legislature that is volunteer. We are purely a citizen legislature. We don't get paid. And so a lot of times like that, I think that's what leads to a lot of really good people in the legislature like burning out, because we're not only like working in the legislature, but we're also having to keep a full-time job unless you just happen to be wealthy or retired. And and I think for those of us who are an elected official, like I think it's it's showing up to events, especially where we know that a lot of our opposition is going to be there, because I know that we've seen it a lot in the last couple years where um, you just have this like people inundate a lot of these like rooms with like they're just filled with a bunch of haters. And I will say that for women and non-binary folk who are serving in these elected offices, or even in positions of leadership, have recently in the last couple years faced a lot of political violence. And unfortunately it feels like it's going to really like increase over time. And I don't say that to like scare people into not running, because in my day job my work is to encourage people to run for office and to train women and non-binary folks to run for office. But so if anybody's out there wants to run for office, let me know. But like I don't say that to scare people. I say that because we need people now more than ever to like stand up for each other and stand up together, because um like there's a very loud minority. I still believe it's a minority of people who are like this, but they're very loud and they're very agitated, and they will work to um to try to take us out, whether it's like metaphorically or like literally. And so I think for us, what's helpful is like just showing up. I think showing up to city council meetings to support your allies, showing up to your state capitals and supporting your allies. Even not even just elected officials, but like there's a lot of organizations. I don't know if you all followed what the vote for today for HR 9241 or something like that, but it's to essentially silence organizations who are doing work. They're who could potentially get their exemption taken from them if they speak out on issue. Right now it's related to Israel and Palestine, but it's so broad that it could result on in other organizations moving forward. And so I think just like looking out for those groups too who are doing this amazing work in your communities, to like really support them as well. Anyone?
Well, this has been really amazing.
Well, good.
Thank you for joining us. I personally was taking diligent notes, and I think it's also very refreshing to have a representative who speaks the way you do and is very accessible. So I appreciate that personally.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Thank you all. I love to talk about this stuff. I want more people to talk about this stuff, and so anything I can do to help now and in the future. You can follow me on Instagram, on TikTok, I'm on Blue Sky now. So like I'm very accessible. Anything I can do to help, like I'm always down to be in community with you all. So thank you for that.
Thank you. We will follow up in an email and be sure to include how folks can get a hold of you and reach out to you. And we would love for you all to stay connected. It's been a really huge joy of mine to get to know you over the years. So thank you so much. And thank you for all the work you do and all the work that goes unseen as well.
No, absolutely. And come ride bikes in New Mexico, y'all. But only Las Cruces.
Okay. I love New Mexico, but I'm starting to think New Mexico doesn't love me.
Why?
I've had 2 bike crashes there.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I had a really bad one last fall. And so, I think that it just takes a certain type.
I think it's wherever it was. I don't think it was here in Cruces.
It wasn't in Las Cruces.
No. That's why you have to ride here.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Alicia. And thank you for everyone who joined us tonight.
Thank you all.